And we're back.
Welcome to episode 195 of No Direction, the No Direction Network's Pathfinder News Reviews and Interviews podcast. I'm Ryan Costello.
I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Perrin.
And we are joined by one of Paizo's new hires. All right. New is also not right, but I'm still going to muscle through. Newish, fairly new hire. Developer, Mr. Ron Lundeen. Hello, Ron.
Hello. Glad to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you, Ron. I really enjoyed you at PaizoCon last year. We had some nice conversations, and I was like, we should have him on the show. Now it's almost the following PaizoCon, and you're finally here.
Hey, at least it made it. Oh, man. For the listeners who didn't know, several big things kept happening that kept pushing Ron's poor interview back further and further, and we feel really bad about that.
Or you could say that you folks are just so on your game as far as knowing exactly what the pulse of the community wants that the very soonest you could slot me in was right now.
Or, again, finger on the pulse, now you've got your hand on a very big chunk of the last adventure path for first edition Pathfinder, and that's what we were saving you for.
Oh, true. All right. Well, then you got me for that.
See? We know what we're doing.
Oh, man. I can't wait till we get to talk about that.
Yeah, before we talk about Tyrant's Grasp, but before we even talk about Pathfinder development, let's talk about Ron Lundeen. What brought you to the dance, Ron? What got you into gaming?
I had I want to say maybe 9 years old, and there were a couple of neighbor kids that played, or they'd just gotten some of the D&D books and were excited to play. To date myself, this would have been early 80s, 82, 83 maybe. And we got together in order to make up characters and play an adventure called Journey to the Rock. One of those old AD&D adventures. But it was, we had been excited about making up characters. And the best part about the session is that every time we would try to play the adventure, we'd all get killed. And so we'd have to all make up new characters. And so I don't know how many characters I went through in my first game session, but I've certainly gone through plenty of other character deaths since, but no session has been as deadly as that very first one.
Now that gives me
I am not familiar with, you said Journey to the Rock?
Journey to the Rock, it was called.
What edition is that one for?
It was AD&D, I want to say, maybe one of the early AD&D. It was, in fact, this won't surprise you. You're trying to get to this rock where a lot of the adventure takes place, but we didn't even get that far, right? We were continuously journeying toward the rock, but never reaching it.
Now, are we talking about a bird? Are we talking about a mountain?
Oh, a big stone in the ground.
Really? So just a rock?
It was just rocks, like a standing stone, right? That was, we're trying to get to some, knockoff version of Stonehenge and being unable to actually get there.
Was there any special reason?
A lot of lives.
Like, was this just a really pretty rock? Did it have magical properties? Was it just?
I do. Well, I remember I think it was Clyde Caldwell art on the beginning of a bunch of adventures, like pointing at the rock, like this is where we're trying to go, and being able to look at the cover of that and say that's where we've been trying to go. All right.
So you're telling me that Journey Towards a Rock that you can't really even tell us the significance of, that killed you multiple times, you were like, I am hooked.
Apparently, yes. Part of the reason I ended up hooked is because I was pretty sure that the neighbor kid who was running it wasn't doing something right. So I'm like, why don't I take over running things hereafter? And so we abandoned that and then picked up, and then I started shortly thereafter a very long running Mystara campaign, first through 36th level, and then we started again and got to 33rd level or something like that. It was one of those, everybody starts sort of those terrible early Monty Hall campaigns where it's just like, all right, here's you find a treasure hoard that's everything that's in the book, right? But it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun for, kids growing up in the suburbs of Salt Lake City, Utah. So that's what got me started. And a lot of people will say, I played D&D when I was young, and, I quit when I was 13, 14. I just never quit. Kept going all the way through high school, all the way through college. And where I am, so.
We're certainly glad you didn't quit.
Scott Melville in chat is calling this Ron and the Stone of Suspicious Significance.
Wait, suspicious significance?
Also,
Oh,
in
man.
chat, Jay Franklin says that the module was B8, so no telling what you played it under, but it was written to be a basic D&D adventure. Of course, back then, that didn't stop anybody from using anything with anything else.
Speaking of chat, Param,
Oh, yes. If you want to chat live with us and get your questions to Ron or us during the episode, you can do so at twitch.tv/no direction. We film these episodes live every Wednesday at 9 o'clock Eastern Time, 6 o'clock Paizo time. And you can just get in there and join the other chatters, ask us questions through the episode, and we'll be working them into the show.
so you said that you just never stopped playing. So you changed editions. I assume that you've played basically a wide variety of games.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, we actually had we skipped around. I think like a lot of people were like, well, we kind of played the fantasy out after we went through an edition or two of Dungeons and Dragons. We played a lot of Shadowrun. I've got a lot of love for a game that came out in 1990 called Torg. It's a cross-genre game. We had a ton of fun with that. My first writing credit was I contributed a couple of monsters to a monster book that West End Games did for their Torg, and that was so I can able to tell people I've been writing in this game industry for more than 20 years now. But in fact, I had that one publication and then about 13, 14 years of no publications.
That's cool, though. How old were you?
At the time, I probably would have been 20.
Okay, but this is pre-internet?
Yeah,
Nascent
it was.
internet.
Well, it was 19. Yeah, I probably would have been about 20 at the time. So early college.
So how did you figure out the submission process? Like, how did you get to that side of the business?
One of the things that I don't remember specifically how I learned about it, but I do know that one of the things that the West End Games was very big on when they did Torg was they had they were very big on communication via a newsletter to their members to show how the campaign was changing as people played adventures. You were encouraged to report in how you did on your adventure, success, failure, did certain NPCs survive or not, and that was sort of changing ultimately what they did as they went along through the game. So we were pretty avid readers of their newsletter, the Infiniverse it was called, and I might have been mentioned in there that, hey, if you're interested in writing for a monster book, then please submit. And by the time I saw that, I'm like, oh, this sounds really interesting. Oh, the submission date was like 6 months ago. But I started paying closer attention when they did the next monster book where they were inviting user submissions. I made sure I was on for that. And so I did. So participated. I think I submitted 4 or 5 monsters and got maybe 3 of them in the book.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you remember some of the monsters?
What's that?
Do you remember what these monsters were?
Yes, it was for a techno-horror reality that was invading the Earth. One of them was basically like a big robot that was trying to replicate itself, so it would go around and sort of wreck up junked cars and things like that, trying to build more of itself. One of them, I don't remember the second one, but the most vivid one in my mind was basically a flying brain with a spine, sort of tendril drooping down from it, big bat-like wings that would fly around in great flocks and terrorize people.
How big are we talking about?
Oh, the size of a brain, real brain.
Okay.
So I think if you got killed by one of these things, maybe your brain turned into one and popped out and joined the flock or what have you.
Well, I mean, that doesn't sound so bad.
Yeah, a group dynamic there.
Any chance any of these end up in Pathfinder Edition in the future?
Oh, goodness, yes. In that the flying brain trope I thought was too good to pass up, and so I did a variant version of that in one of the products that I did. It was my own third-party publishing. Changed the name, but ordered new art and did Pathfinder stats for it. I think it was like Gizzet instead of the Ziggit or something like that. Something sort of silly sounding, but it was the same sort of flying brain concept. The one part of that I couldn't get away from.
And our listeners
And you
might
know,
find this contraption on DriveThru.
What's that?
And our listeners might find this creation on DriveThru or Paizo.
It is, yeah. It is the Run Amok Bestiary that is on DriveThru. It's on DriveThru Games. It's on Paizo.com. D20 PFSRD store sells it. So the 3 venues that I put my own Run Amok Games products out on.
Can we talk about Run Amok for a bit? So I know Run Amok for your blog. Like, that's the name of your blog. I didn't realize this was also the name of your publishing company.
Yep. The Run Amok Games. I don't know. Several years ago, I founded that. I've got a real strong drive to be telling adventure stories. Right, adventures is what I love to write. And when I started to do writing for the Living Greyhawk campaign, eventually became an administrator there, and was able to do more writing for the Living Greyhawk campaign. Did some Pathfinder Society writing. In the meantime, whenever I had sort of a downtime in my writing, I would still have adventure ideas and put them together. And I thought, well, there's got to be a way to kind of package these together. I actually worked with another small third-party publisher, a guy named Axel Carlson, who did Headless Hydra Games, which is now defunct as far as I can tell. But he gave me a shot to put some of my adventures together for his third-party company, and was actually really great about walking through. So here's what I do to create it, to order the art, to make it available for sale, to do all the things that a third-party publisher does. Really sort of took me under his wing about how you get these things done, helped me to know what I needed to do and to set up Run Amok Games. So the first product I had with that was an adventure. First couple products I've had with that have been adventures, branched out, do Bestiary, Book of Villains, Book of Settlements, communities large and small.
Hold on. I appear to have lost both of our guests on Discord. Gang, the internet has been quite contentious lately, so that is likely what
but I did have a convention adventure that I put together.
Hold. We had an outage. Yeah. So there's a bit of an edit point we'll have to have here. So where it cut out, and we lost both of you guys, was when you were talking about. You first said that you started with a couple adventures, then did a bestiary, and then you froze solid, and we lost you.
Oh.
So from that point forward, if you could kind of reiterate the important point after 5 seconds of silence.
Oh, no problem. Sorry about that.
No, it's not your fault. The internet is being wacky.
That's 5 seconds of silence.
Okay.
So after writing not only several adventures branched out, said bestiaries, books of villains, books of communities. One of the things that I've done, the latest thing that I've done for Run Amok Games was a convention adventure I wrote where all the players play trolls, sort of a real be the monster, be the bad guy sort of adventure. Backstory being a bunch of dwarves came in, butchered a bunch of trolls in the tribe, but they didn't finish the job with enough fire or acid to have a few left. And you're those few left. And, those dwarves stole an ancestral relic of your tribe. You're going to go get it back. And you're not going to let any humans or elves or dwarves stand in your way.
And are these adventures the reason that you came to Paizo's attention?
Only indirectly, in that I feel like I got a lot of work on crafting adventures, doing this sort of thing. I think the thing that got me to Paizo's attention was organized playwriting. Mm-hmm. I had, every now and again, Paizo will do, haven't for a while, but for a while they would do an open call for writing Pathfinder Society adventures. And I responded to one of those. And my submission, my idea was not, hey, here's a thing I want to write independent of what you've done. It was, I kind of want to do a sequel to one of the adventures you've done that was kind of popular. Mark Moreland, like that, who's running who's developing that at the time, gave me a shot, very much like what I turned in. I knew at the time, like, okay, this is my opportunity to show that I'm professional and can do things on time and be diligent and correct. And so I worked hard to make sure that Tide of Twilight was a exceptional adventure. Resonated well enough that I got more writing work from them on the Pathfinder Society adventure line. And then from there, up through the ranks, the way a lot of Paizo's freelancers do, writing for the player companion line, and then the campaign setting, and then ultimately to some of the hardcover books, and then the adventure paths.
So what?
I've played Tide of Twilight.
Yes, me
I'm trying
too.
to remember it though.
I have a question.
Anyway, go on, Param.
What would you say, since you seem to really love writing adventures and you've got such a strong backing in it, what do you say is your style? Like, what are your hallmarks? What would people recognize if they studied a lot of your adventures as sort of the things that make them yours?
One of the things that I want to make sure that people stop and do is, on the course of otherwise murder hoboing their way through a series, an adventure, to realize, hey, some of these villains have a story. Some of them have a background. There are plenty of villains whose job it is to throw themselves at the PCs, to fall in front of the PCs. That's their job. But plenty of them have other motives that would be able to sort of throw up their hands and say, whoa. This enemy gets down to 50 hit points or so from, whatever they're 200 down to 50, and then suddenly they're, wait, like, I'm in bad shape here. Let me tell you what I'm trying to do. Maybe we can work out some sort of deal. So I try to build in a lot of being able to sort of negotiate your way around what the villains are doing. A lot of times, once you figure out what the villain has got going on, then trying to come up with other ways to resolve that is certainly sometimes possible. I'm well aware there are a lot of different gaming groups, and some of them like to just sort of murder everything with their swords and spells. So that's an option, right? But at the same time, one of the things that I'll do is put villains that are either particularly difficult to overcome in front of the PCs, and sort of have them think, wait a minute, what is this villain trying to do? How might we think of some other way around to either foil this villain or otherwise get what we want in the face of the villain?
Now, when you flip the genre on its head like that, is there any concern that now the rest of the genre will just look upside down?
The what?
I might have gone too deep with that metaphor. Basically, when you show like there's alternatives to fighting villains to the death, that some of the villains will have deeper story, is there a concern that now all other adventures will pale in comparison to a Ron Lundeen adventure?
Gosh, I hope so. In that, what I hope will happen around the gaming table is the next adventure, maybe written by somebody else. The PCs will think, what does this villain want? How can we foil that? And maybe there's a little less bloodshed, right? I don't know. Maybe there's a little more bloodshed as a result. I'm not sure. But having the players think to themselves, hey, what are the motivations going on here? What's the villain's motivation? What's my motivation? Other than just sort of a raft of numbers. I'd like to think sort of elevates the play experience, no matter what they're playing.
Now, sometime between the freelance work and working full-time for Paizo, you became a lawyer?
Oh, yeah. That was actually, it was in between. I was actually studying, let me tell you about this watershed moment. I was studying ancient history at the University of Utah. I was doing my graduate work, and I had a full-on intent to become a historian. I had a math background, and the history of math is something that hadn't really been touched on. I thought that could be my area, my field. We got a new professor in that I wrote a paper for, and then she came back, wanted to meet with me in her office, and just told me all the ways in which my paper was just subpar. It wasn't written well. Undergrads could do better than I could. This was just not, it was just not good, and I needed to do it again and do better and try harder. So I went to the university library, resolved to get some books and do better, try harder. And for some reason that day, the University of Utah being a public university, technically a lot of its finances are public information. On the edge of the counter in the library was a big binder with all of the salaries of all of the staff of the university. So I flipped over to my professor, this new professor, and then realized, wait a minute, I'm doing better at my part-time job now than I would be if I actually made it as a history professor. So maybe if I want to be, at the time I was dating someone who expected to be a stay-at-home mom. Like, well, I'm going to be supporting a whole family. Maybe I ought to do a little better than history. Had a good friend of mine who said he was in history only long enough to get to law school. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe I could go to law school. All the people that had been telling me for big sections of my life, I think you'd make a great lawyer. I realized they weren't actually insulting me. They were trying to give me genuine career advice. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I applied to law school, took the LSAT, I happened to have the best test day of my life the day I sat down to take the LSAT. I was very lucky. And then got into the University of Chicago. It kind of fell one thing after the other for that. Yeah, it was just great school, number 5 law school in the nation. So the classes I really enjoyed were around health and biomedical ethics in the law. And so I went to work for a firm in downtown Chicago for 6 or 7 years. It was very enjoyable. I liked what I did. The hours were a lot longer than I would like, so I moved to go in-house. I was in-house for Walgreens for several years, almost a decade, I want to say. And again, I built up a great team. By that time, I had a team of lawyers working underneath me. I liked the clients I worked with. I liked the job that I did. I loved the attorneys that were on my team. But when Paizo had a opening for a developer about 2 years ago, not quite 2 years ago, I said, I think I want to go for this. And I have to say that my wife was far more supportive than I deserve, and that I said, no, I think I want to follow my dream and do this. And it just doesn't make a lot of sense, right? It doesn't make financial sense for the family, and have to uproot them and move them all the way from Illinois to the Seattle area. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. She was the one who was telling me over and over, look, this is your dream. You've got to go do this. Mm-hmm. So I did, left law behind, and I have not regretted it since.
Wow.
You often hear the advice that people should live their dream, but I like it when people multi-class their dream.
I did sort of multi-class my dream, as a matter of fact. I've got to put it in. I'm transitioning my bar membership from Illinois to Washington, done some volunteering out here. I'll be able to sort of dig in for some more pro bono stuff to be able to put my degree to use in a way that sort of helps people. I think it'd be kind of fun.
I love that you're a game designer who lawyers on the side.
That's right. I had a good friend of mine who, when I was making the move, he said, right now you're a lawyer and you do game design on the side. You're planning on flipping that, right? You're going to be a lawyer. You can still do a little bit, or you're going to be a game designer. You can still do a little lawyering on the side. Yeah. So I don't see why not.
And of course, in the throes of about to launch a new edition of the game, I'm sure you'll have all that free time in your schedule to do all that not very taxing lawyer work. How does that... How?
Well, there's an awful lot of opportunity for not being sort of deep, intricate contract law, court appearance type of lawyers. There's volunteer work at clinics and things like that. That's the thing that appeals to me. That's what I want to be sort of doing my part-time lawyering in, is help people who are trying to establish businesses get sort of a leg in. I mean, there's a lot of need for people that have a legal background to just provide some help. So that's I've already made it very clear that I am not in it for the money by moving from lawyer to Paizo. So
that's the part I didn't understand earlier in your story. We were like, you looked at the history book and the professors make less money than you do, and I'm like, and game design doesn't seem to make all that much more than I'm a lawyer.
I told that story. No. I do. I don't. Game designer is about equivalent with history professor, I suppose. That's I ended up there anyway.
That tracks with my experience.
It's also nice, you're a side of lawyers people don't talk about. People usually are all down on lawyers, but you're helping people establish businesses, you're volunteering your time. That's the nicest lawyer I've ever heard of.
Yeah, there's awful lot of prosecutors out there. One of my favorite lawyer joke is, 99% of lawyers give the rest of us a bad name.
So now you're a full-time game designer. What were some of the early tasks you were assigned at Paizo?
I've actually, if you pick up sort of our Adventure Path volumes, I've kind of moved from the back of that to the front of that. That was my journey at Paizo has been like that. The very end of the adventures where we put adventure paths, where we put new monsters, short articles, things like that. That's what I started doing was the back matter for War for the Crown. Mm-hmm. Articles about sneaky Rakshasas and spy agencies and various monsters. That was it was neat. It was fun because it was very discreet. I could settle in and take a monster turnover that had been done, and then spend just a day or two putting it up to the right, the right styles and make sure the numbers match and everything. I'm like, okay, and then put that down and head to something totally different. That was a lot of fun. But then when the thing that let me do is keep enough information about the whole adventure paths so that I could write for them as well, sort of push my way into writing for them as well. And I guess I'd thought that would continue all the way through War for the Crown as well. I wrote the first one of those. And at the time I was handling the back matter of that adventure path, and Crystal Fraser was handling the adventures part. She was the one that had assigned me the Dead Roads, assigned all the authors for the adventure path. And she announced that she was leaving last July, and leaving Paizo last July. That actually kind of hit me really hard. I'm like, whoa, what? That's, she's been great to work with. That's been a lot of fun. And then sort of everybody assumed that I would just sort of step into her place and then handle the adventure path, starting from my first adventure onward. Like, well, that actually kind of makes a lot of sense, right? I know the whole story. I kicked off the whole story as an author. So I've been going through and doing that development as well. A little bit of other development tasks on the side, the occasional Starfinder Society scenario and things like that. It's sort of an all hands have to be helping out around here. The exception being second edition. I've got some experience with getting the second edition together, doing some writing for that as a freelancer. But my work has only really begun to include second edition like in the past week. So there's plenty of people around the office. I'd be, oh, hey, I'm doing this stuff for, Tyrant's Grasp and the Dead Roads and first edition. Hey, do you remember we used to have a first edition for this game? Because for a lot of people around the office, it's been so long ago since they've even touched anything first edition that sort of a disconnect there.
I guess it's just you and a small group that's still developing anything for first edition.
Yeah, I think that I don't know if Luis Loza, Eleanor Farron, I think they're done with their development first edition. I think the Pathfinder Society, the organized play team, I think they're still doing some of their development work for first edition. But there's not very many of us.
But Tyrant's Grasp, like how far along are you as far as development goes?
I've got as far as the development goes, I finished substantially all the development. There's putting some text onto the page that's still got to be done. But that's not anything that's going to take me very long. So I was actually just put out a message to some of the people. We've got on the Paizo forums, we've got individual boards for some of the scenarios that are coming out. I said, hey, when you get around to the fourth scenario, I happen to spot an error I made. It'll make more sense when it comes out, but here's a thing that you're going to need to fix as soon as you get there. But yeah, I finished up the all the way through to the end. Is substantially complete now. It's a matter of getting it through the editing and the layout. It comes back to me in order to make sure everything sort of looks good on the page. Then it goes off gets the appropriate corporate approvals. It goes off to the printer. It's kind of a long journey.
I'm intrigued by this error in book 4. Can you just, without spoiling anything, what is the scope of the error? How bad is it if GMs don't fix it?
So, as it turns out, golems, when you apply the Shield Guardian template, gain fast healing. There is a particular golem that's a Shield Guardian that I didn't note that it has fast healing. It matters because this is actually somebody on the PC's side. And so the longer this thing survives, the better it is for the PCs. So if it were an error that worked against the PCs, I might say, you know what, I'm not going to mention it. But this is one that will help the PCs maybe live just that much longer, and they'll want it. They'll need it. So fix this.
Good on you for putting up, basically answering FAQ that is to come.
I knew it would be coming. So
So we're talking about Tyrant's Grasp. You wrote the first one, like you said. Mm-hmm. Why don't we remind people what Tyrant's Grasp is all about?
All right. Well, this is actually, it's best described as sort of the survival horror adventure path. We've got the player's guide out. Some people are already seeing even the second volume of this. The player's guide explains that you are in the nation of Lastwall. It's well known for being a nation of paladins and knights who fought against the Whispering Tyrant. Tar-Baphon, the Whispering Tyrant, who's been imprisoned for 900 years. They were the ones who sort of saw him imprisoned. They were the ones who imprisoned him 900 years ago. And the reason they call them their nation Lastwall is because they're like, we're going to keep this guy in, right? He's going to get no further than our Lastwall here. He's been pretty quiet for 900 years, so they've turned their attention elsewhere. There's a bunch of orcs on the border that they're fighting with. They end up getting a lot of sort of divided attention. Plenty of people wish for the glory days of the Whispering Tyrant and his undead and orcish hordes to come out, and I think there's probably quite a few people who are saying to themselves, not public with that, kind of wouldn't be so bad if this guy came back, because then we'd be able to get all the righteous glory that our ancestors had that we feel like maybe we're due. But the PCs themselves are part of what is they're in what is the most remote community in this nation that there is. It's on the other side of a big forest. It's really far from the front lines. A little dinky town called Roslar's Coffer. And the player's guide gives you the history of Lastwall, of Roslar's Coffer, warns you that this is going to be sort of a survival horror type of adventure, and that you might not have, free access to markets to buy anything you want any old time. That's something to keep in mind. And then gives you maybe a little bit of a connection to the town of Roslar's Coffer. Not a very strong one. There's not a big thorough gazetteer of Roslar's Coffer, and that almost certainly is because the second adventure is called Eulogy for Roslar's Coffer. There are bad things in store, perhaps, for this very little community.
I mean, there's a history of titles spoiling things, but they also set expectations. Like, don't fall in love with Roslar's Coffer, PCs. Just a little birdie's whispering in your ear telling you not to do that.
Yeah, it's actually... goes my microphone. The titles for the adventure path, Crystal Fraser set up. It was one of the things that she did in outlining it. And I think some people have noticed the first three are death related. The first three titles, The Dead Roads, Eulogy for Roslar's Coffer, Last Watch. And then the other ones are birth related. Gardens of Gallowspire, Born by the Sun's Grace, and then finally Midwives to Death, which is sort of both. But there's a lot of birth and death going on in there. The Psychopomps, the undead from the Boneyard, followers of Pharasma that deal with death and a proper flow of souls and even birth, are an important factor in this. And so their feelings about birth and death and how those flow through is a big part of this as well.
So it really sounds like the problems end with Volume 3, and then it's just smooth sailing.
It's just nice from then on, right?
That's a nice change of pace.
A nice 3-book happy ending for first edition. That's an ambitious. That's an ambitious plan.
One of the later volumes, I'm excited to say, I'm excited people are getting excited about. One of the later volumes, in ways I won't talk about in detail, get the players to the continent of Arcadia, which is sort of our version of the Americas in the world. There's a particular nation there that we go into very, very deep history about, how its history connects not only to the people there, but even to some of the big movers and shakers of the Inner Sea. I think it's something that people are going to be excited about. The fifth one, the Born by the Sun's Grace, is actually very Arcadia focused in a way that I think people are going to be very excited about.
Ooh.
Now, this is the last adventure path for first edition. Is this your Flashpoint? Like,
Flashpoint as far as
DC rebooted to the New 52, they had a time travel event with the Flash, and then he came back, and the timeline was still a little off, but he was like, "This is close enough." Like, is this going to be kind of a reason why Golarion feels a little bit different when second edition starts?
No, because from from the point of view of people in Golarion, there hasn't been a change. There are some events that are going to happen. One of the things that we're doing for second edition, we're being very intentional about some of the changes that have gone on because of the adventure paths we've done. So I think it is probably not too much of a spoiler to say, hey, plenty of people played Wrath of the Righteous in order to close the World Wound second edition. World Wound's closed. But then, I mean, what as a result, what does that mean for the world? So it's not that there's going to be a specific change in the world that people who are in it all along wouldn't notice. But if all you did was pick up the Inner Sea World Guide, which we did 10 years ago, read it, put it down, and then looked at some of the new stuff we're doing, you'll see a lot of changes. That's because there's a lot of stuff that's gone on in the last 10 years, and most of it have been done by the heroes playing our games.
I do remember when second edition was announced, I don't believe Tyrant's Grasp had been announced yet, and there was talk that the adventure paths would be resolved and we would find out how some of them worked. And most of them would resolve in the PC's favor, because otherwise there would be no Golarion. But some of them might not. And one of the ones we theorized would be Carrion Crown, because that one's actually more interesting if the PCs fail, because the Whispering Tyrant comes back. And then lo and behold, Tyrant's Grasp. So was that the thinking? That a Golarion with the Tyrant's Grasp, with the Whispering Tyrant is just more interesting than one without one?
He's on the cover of our campaign setting book for first edition, and we've done startlingly little with him until very recently. So
it goes back even further.
Yeah, that's trying to fix that.
It goes back even further than that. The very first thing of a Pathfinder paraphernalia I have is a little Game Mastery Encounter pack, the Vault of the Whispering Tyrant, with the really silliest looking Tar-Baphon mini imaginable. That I think is still available on your website. It does not represent the Grangio. His horns got much longer for subsequent versions, and he's got much more dramatic poses. But like this, I think he's like a CR16 Lich in the version that I have him in the original Game Mastery Encounter. So, and that's like one of the very, very beginning first things that was ever written for Golarion. And it's interesting to see it as what's going to basically bookend Pathfinder.
Yep, that's absolutely true.
So is the Whispering Tyrant only CR16, like his little mini?
Oh no.
No. It's going to be harder.
Oh no.
Will I get to use that mini?
Unavailable.
Is there going to be fake Whispering Tyrants I can use that mini for?
No, he's got people who work for him who are higher than CR16.
So, it feels like PCs are going to have to deal with this threat. So, what level does this adventure path go up to?
It goes up to 18. I think some of our materials say it goes up to 17th level, but I managed to sort of cram in just enough stuff to level the PCs to 18th for the very last couple of things they do in the final adventure. So I know that the Return of the Rune Lords before the adventure path before Tyrant's Grasp took everybody all the way to 20th level, which is great. It did so at the expense of some of the back matter articles that we thought were sort of important for telling the story of this one. And so if you've got back matter articles about what it's like to be in the negative plane and ecology of carnivorous plants and things, you're like, I mean, why would we need to know these things in order to play Tyrant's Grasp? But there's a lot of that plays in. Going forward in second edition, the adventure paths we have, the intent is to have them all go from level 1 to level 20. So I think that there will probably be, in addition to being the last first edition adventure path, Tyrant's Grasp, people will look back on it and go, oh yeah, how was that one that didn't take you all the way to 20th level? Just because we got it structured to go to 18. In the future, that'll be sort of weird, right? That it doesn't take you all the way to 20th.
Scott Melville in chat is making reference to the whispering bureaucracy.
People here, you must have a certain number of in your annual performance reviews. You have to demonstrate your CR, and if you're unable to pass muster, then given a low rating, and you're demoted to smaller cults of the Whispering Way.
You've accidentally revealed the end of this one. They just do not pass the review because the PCs only make it to CR 18.
Oh, see, I was figuring that they passed the review, and that's why they don't have to fight a god, and they actually have a chance of winning.
By the bureaucracy?
Yes.
Oh no, you never beat the bureaucracy.
We're going to bureaucracy our way through. There's all right, I suppose there's one part of it where you actually, some bureaucratic skills could actually benefit you against him, but I don't want to get too far into that. It's not off the
when a lawyer becomes a developer.
Yes.
Man, I dread
So
seeing
talked
the
a lot about
site.
the adventure path as a whole, but we haven't talked so much about the one that you wrote, the Dead Roads.
Mm-hmm.
What can you tell us about the Dead Roads?
Okay, before we get started, it's going to be very hard for us to talk about this adventure without spoiling some stuff. So you may want to skip 10 minutes ahead or so in the podcast if you don't want to get spoiled on Dead Roads.
Alrighty, with that out of the way, one of the things that's exciting about the kickoff of this adventure path is we have everybody start dead.
Thank you. How many times have I said I wanted this "You Start Dead" adventure path on this podcast, Ryan?
6.
Yeah, you start off in a little box and it's dark and you have no idea where you are, and the first check you make is to push the lid of your sarcophagus aside and then try to figure out where you're at from there.
I thought you were going to go with Kill Bill, and the first thing you got to do is a skill check to wiggle your toe.
Wiggle your toe and then try to get up, and you at least start with your stuff. This is when I say this is a survival horror game. I don't think we come necessarily right out and say, don't be a cavalier. You might be disappointed about how you don't start with your horse, but you don't start with your horse. But figuring out where you are, it's actually speaking of the bureaucracy, it's a very bureaucracy-based adventure in that the problem is the players have somehow gotten themselves thrown into the land of the dead when they shouldn't be, and they have to sort of figure out how to get back to the land of the living when there's this extended bureaucracy of psychopomps who are all about making sure souls are sort of shepherded the right way. To some of these psychopomps, the right way for the PCs is to go back to the world of the living. That's where they ought to go, and it's sort of put sort of brush this whole unpleasant business under the rug. But for others, they've moved on to the boneyard, and they need to be moving on. And if that means they've got to be put to a more permanent end, all the better. So there's a little bit of bureaucratic back and forth in that.
So psychopomp enemies, that's something you don't usually fight.
Well, because they're neutral creatures. I mean, if you look at the who we have even depicted on the covers of our adventures, they're almost always evil villains you face. Sometimes they are allies that you can earn, but there's not a lot of in between. In this one, it's the antagonist. It's a skeletal Katrina Psychopomp. She's the antagonist. She thinks that the PCs ought to be stopped, but she's not evil. She's just sort of insistent in her own bureaucratic way. Now, I know that any of us that have been to the DMV or whatever can think that bureaucracy can be, in fact, very evil. But it was actually a really good challenge for me to have. All right, I'm going to have the opponent not be evil, and you actually get her motive. You understand her motivations very early on. Mm-hmm. When we were talking about what is a Ron Lundeen adventure like, well, you understand what the motives of the villain are, and want to work within or around that in a different way. This really typifies that type of adventure. I'm really thankful that Crystal let me write it.
Well, the problem is like I can totally see why the Psychopomp thing. You got the greater cosmic balance to consider here. How are you going to prevent like I'm assuming there's going to be some amount of PCs that are just like, you know what? No, they're right. So maybe we should move on and just let some other crew handle this. Like, is there some checks and balances or something to encourage the PCs that maybe do not walk towards the shining light?
No, I mean, in that the bureaucracy becomes very clear that the bureaucracy that's going to step in is going to step in on the antagonist's side. So if anything, it kind of becomes like, oh, if we want to actually even figure out what happened to us, we gotta go and we gotta head back to Galarian. We have to head back to the world, which means traveling what the Psychopomps call the dead roads, the roads that connect them between the living and the boneyard and the lands of the living.
Now, neutral creatures have stat blocks and hit points, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, then they had it coming.
But Ryan, good creatures have stat blocks and hit points.
Yeah, and people run evil campaigns, but nobody's really going for the neutral creatures.
That's a good
The animals. I can't help but find comparisons between this and Spiral of Bones, which is the comic that Crystal was writing around the same time that it sounds like she was developing this.
Yeah, actually, I was reading that. I actually read that. It was on a like our book's on a longer publication schedule, so I didn't read it till it came out after I'd already turned all this in. But yeah, it's the same idea where Valeros is sort of inadvertently sent to the Boneyard, and there's a series of a much more bureaucratic series of lawyers who are sort of jockeying over where his soul belongs. In that case, the mistake was, I think he's somebody that he wasn't. There was some sort of mistaken identity plot here.
Yeah, an evil wizard just swapped souls with him. He took the opportunity to send somebody else to deal with his afterlife consequences.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
Yes.
In this one, throughout, actually, in my adventure, there is somebody that swapped in to suffer for afterlife consequences. It isn't the PCs, but it's somebody that they can help. And so there's a little bit of that kind of off to the side. But it's not a case of mistaken identity in the PC's case. It's being in the wrong place at the wrong time, but not remembering that you were in that place or why you were there or what the wrong time was. That's all stuff you uncover as it goes on.
Now, I think when you were saying the premise, you were saying that the PCs are from Lastwall, but now it sounds like they don't know who they were.
No, they know they were from the town of Lastwall. Okay. The last memories they have is we were in this town called Roslar's Coffer, and everything was kind of fine. And then suddenly we're here in the lands of the dead. With
that's fine.
So something must have happened.
Does Truck-kun have a way to go across dimensions?
What's that?
I was like, does Truck-kun have a way to get across dimensions? Oh, sorry. It was a reference to isekai.
Okay.
The Japanese genre of died and make it into a new world, which this is going to have quite a bit of connections to. They comically overuse they got hit by a truck metaphor is how they died. Okay. And so that truck has become a character in the metaverse of people that follow the genre, and they've even personified them, and they've even made a manga about Truck-kun, the hero that's the hero that finds heroes to send to other worlds that need them.
And so the truck metaphorically comes barreling on.
Yes.
I mean, it's not a truck, but it's bad.
It sounds bad. I mean, or maybe not. I mean, evidently it didn't bother them, except for the inconvenience of being suddenly dead. But that does kind of raise a point. Usually, when you die, there's supposed to be this process, this very organized process that the psychopomps are good at. And it doesn't usually involve you having all of your equipment. So, is there any what?
Yeah, something very unusual and very unprecedented is what's happened here. Mm-hmm. And one thing that the player characters will get pretty early on is how unusual their situation is. I mean, if the psychopomps are sort of ageless caretakers of the dead, are like, oh, you've never seen this kind of thing happen before. It's got to be something very powerful, very unique. And so that, if anything, ought to spur them to get back to Golarion and figure out what happened here? What's happened here? And worse, might it happen again? we don't want a return trip to the Boneyard. We want to get out and stay out.
So tell us a little bit about these dead roads. What sort of they're just a safe stroll down the street, right?
No. It's actually I don't know whether Crystal invented the dead roads or whether or not it's a concept that we've had earlier. But unlike a lot of other powerful outsiders, psychopomps can't plane shift. They just can't go from plane to plane on their own. But a lot of their work involves coming to the material plane to administer overbirths and deaths and things like that. So they have to have some way of getting to and from the Boneyard. And the dead roads are what those are. Mm-hmm. Now, the psychopomps get to use them very freely, and they hardly even notice the scenery as they go by. But when the PCs, the living creatures, want to head on the dead roads, it turns out there's a lot of obstacles in their way. Bureaucratic obstacles, in fact. They need to get sort of these, seals of approval and travel stamps, I guess you might call them, and that requires that they stop along the way in a couple of different places in order to get the permission to travel on. This makes very small sort of mini adventures within my adventures that I was excited about making each different sort of types of horror tropes. So there's a little bit of a body horror one, a little bit of a like crazy cosmic nightmare one, and there's a little bit of sort of gothic horror in one of them. I mean, it's a lot of different sort of, as you move from sort of one place to another, you pick up a lot of different types of horror as you go through. It's not the sort of thing that we felt like we needed to slap a content warning on, but the themes are certainly there.
And should we expect the Journey to the Rock level of body count for this adventure path?
Gosh, I hope not. I don't know, or maybe I hope I do, because that was a lot of fun.
You're already starting at -6. You got to work your way back to 0.
There is one of the questions that's come up that people have said is if we're somehow special, right? If our heroes are special because of the way things have begun here, what happens if a PC dies? I mean, and isn't recoverable? What is it that only part of the group now is special? And there, in fact, is mechanisms for introducing new player characters that have kind of been through the same sort of thing. But later on in the campaign, it's like, yeah, and then you got out of the Dead Roads, right? Then you got out of the Boneyard. But it's a task that confronts the PCs here in order to escape.
So one PC dies, and then they're like, "Do you guys hear banging on another sarcophagus?"
Exactly. Like, let's open that up. We know you're very confused, but let's explain a few things to you. All right, now you can join our party.
This reminds me of Vermintide, where you do that sort of happens. It sort of replaces the characters that die between adventures while you're playing it, but it's the same person that died. It's like, are we just gonna George? How?
That's been my experience in the games we've played. I've played and run a lot of the Pathfinder adventure paths over the past several years, and it seems there's always one player we get some character deaths, but there's almost always one player at the table. It's often, but not always, my friend Greg, his character just goes through character after character after character. It's not that they're bad characters. He's just not very lucky when it comes to keeping characters alive. At some tables, it's me. At some much more troublesome tables, it's my wife. Her characters keep dying over and over, and they go, "Oh well, what are you going to do about that?" So yeah, maybe you're the wrong person.
So this adventure sounds amazingly cool, and I really want to run it. So as a GM who would be interested in running this adventure, what should I prep? Is there any inspiration material I should look into? Like, what sorts of adventures and challenges should I buff up on if I was going to spring this on my players?
We have one of the advantages with this adventure path is we're able to build out a lot going on in the Nation of Lastwall because there wasn't a lot about it. I mean, if you're a GM, if you read the 4 pages or so about Lastwall in the Inner Sea World Guide, it's going to give you a pretty solid history for everything you need to know about the setting for a lot of the adventure path. We do have an exceptional amount of lore about the Whispering Tyrant, the Shining Crusade, but as long as you've got kind of a grounding in the specific setting, I think that's going to be helpful. As far as inspirational materials, there's a lot of I guess most of it leaning towards horror to prep you for this. I think I saw the movie Crimson Peak, which informed a lot of the gothic horror that I had. There's a lot of Stephen King sort of tropes about ordinary people trying to get along when things go suddenly very, very bad. It's very useful and helpful for that kind of background feel of the thing.
Now, I've played through Carrion Crown, which the more I'm hearing about this, the less this sounds like a sequel to that. So is there any connection between the two adventure paths?
The only significant connection between the two adventure is if you played through Carrion Crown, you know that the Whispering Way is an organization of nihilists and cultists and necromancers who follow the Whispering Tyrant. The Whispering Way also takes a big role in this adventure path. but they suffered a pretty serious defeat in Carrion Crown. They're not nearly as organized. They're you can see. I mean, let's just back to the bureaucracy, right? Just say you're an up and coming cultist, right? And the events of Carrion Crown happen, and you're not one of the leaders, but the leadership all gets killed off by this rampaging band of adventurers. And you're thinking to yourself, well, I want to make something of myself. Now is my opportunity to get ahead in my organization and become like chief compliance officer of the Whispering Way or whatever. But you're going to have a lot of people who are sort of jockeying for different positions there, which means the organization is going to be a little bit fractured. That's super useful if you're the heroes in Tyrant's Grasp, because you don't have nearly as monolithic an organization trying to put a stop to you.
Just thinking,
yeah, it sounds like they're pulling off what the monolithic version of the organization couldn't.
No. Well, yes. Here's the monolithic version of the organization had an idea to create this device, this Carrion Crown, this alchemical treatment that would get the Whispering Way free. It may be better to say in Tyrant's Grasp, the Whispering Tyrant realized the Whispering Way can't help him. He's got to get out himself. Ooh. So it's really more of him taking things into his own hands rather than relying on the Whispering Way to do it for him.
Is the Whispering Tyrant Thanos? I mean, is that the secret? Is this some cross-branding deal that y'all have had in the works for 10 years?
Yeah, I don't know. Some cross-branding. I don't know, Whispering Way robes or cloaks or something.
No, I was just thinking about how horribly and hilariously ironic it would be to be a Whispering Way low-level employee who decided to retire to Roslar's Coffer.
Oh, eulogy thereof.
Oh, we have a question from chat. Scott Melville wants to know, what are your favorite house rules?
My favorite house rules?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good question. Most of the campaigns I run, Pathfinder campaigns I run have been Gestalt. I like the Gestalt rules, not because they necessarily give greater power to the PCs, but they give you a broader set of options. I mean, you can't fly before you get to 5th level. You can't raise the dead until you're 9th level. Survivability to get there. Generally speaking, I found it means people can take more encounters without resting, which makes the pace of game when we get together for 3 hours or 4 hours, instead of, all right, let's do a couple of encounters and then we all rest and do that downtime, or maybe we go shopping and we go back and do another couple of encounters. The Gestalt rules let you sort of carry on through from one session, right? You get to the end of the night, oh, it's 11 o'clock. I'm running out of my prodigious selection of spells, so yeah, let's go ahead and take a break. It just lets the game keep going. Now, I got to say, there's a lot of Gestalt breaking that can happen when you let people take prestige classes or multi-class, and I don't allow any of that. You pick your 2 classes at the beginning, and those are the 2 you take all the way up. Had a lot of success with that. That's a key house rule that I use.
It amazes me how popular Gestalt is to this day, and yet, like, it's a 3.0 or 3.5 rule that, you know, there's no official Pathfinder version of Gestalt. It's just a concept in the back of our brains.
And there's also very little fiction that supports the idea of, like, this is the wizard paladin, this is the weird combo guy, the druid monk. Like, it's purely a gamified version of the game, and yet it's a lot of fun to play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly gives you a lot of options. There's I love the fact that I was able to really bother my friend Cheryl, who was playing a cleric and Zen archer monk. She really wanted to be shooting awesome arrows all the time, but she just had to keep healing the people that were going down, right? So the fact that it doesn't give you more things you can do in a round, but more options, actually can create some real tension between, oh, here's this cool thing I could do, but what ought I do versus how can I best help my party? I think it's neat. I've actually been a little bit surprised that we haven't done anything with that or for that, but
actually, speaking of, Bard Wannabe in chat is suggesting that we probably should define what Gestalt is, because it isn't a Pathfinder option, and it's been close to 20 years since it was written.
It's a fair point. So what the way that I describe it to people, a lot of my players have never never seen the Gestalt rules. They're hearing it from me as the first time they've heard it. So the way I explain it to them is that you, instead of picking a character class when you start, you'll pick two. You pick two character classes. When you determine how many hit points you get when you level up, it's the better of the two. What's your fort save bonus? The better of the two. Same with will save. Same with skill skill points you get. You get the class skills of both of them together, and then you you get all the class features of both of them. So if you were Gestalt as a cleric and a wizard, you would have cleric spells based on your wisdom. They're separate from the wizard spells you get based on your intelligence, but you track them both all the way through. If you want to have an archetype for one class or another, when I run it, that's fine. You establish that, but you don't get to do anything other than those classes. So as you go up, you'll be all the way up to your 16th, 17th, 18th, whatever level in those specific classes. And then I also can take classes that tend to be overpowered at the table that I've found and say, you can be that, but it counts as both your Gestalt. You want to be a summoner or you want to be a druid, that's fine. You're a summoner or a druid right out of the box, and that counts. You don't Gestalt that. That's what you are. And the fact that you've got a powerful buddy who can actually take a separate action in combat and so on is your advantage.
And I just looked it up. Gestalt is the psychological term that an organized whole is perceived to be more than the sum of its parts. So that's a definition that I didn't know how to word.
It's also, this is a lot of the original pitch for this was it is a way that if you have less than 4 players, it's a good way to buff up their abilities and to make them more capable to handle pre-written material that assumes a party of 4.
Yeah, and assumes the skills you'd find in a party of 4. If nobody's going to be devoting a character to finding and disabling traps, the fact that somebody can devote half their character to finding and disabling traps is more likely that it's going to get that base covered.
I found that the barbarian is usually good at finding and disabling traps as long as you're prodding far enough back.
With the face.
Well, in order to account, there is a uptick in power that the players have, especially when I've got a 5 and 6 person table. But because in the adventure paths, instead of tracking XP, I do the story leveling. I just tell them when they go up a level, if they seem to be handling things very well, the next time the adventure path says they ought level, they just don't, right? And so that just happens automatically. On the other hand, if they seem like they're really struggling, right? Well, you're supposed to be 4th level by now, but okay, everybody advanced to 5th. I don't tell them you're struggling, do better. Here's a sympathy level. They don't know where the level breaks are, so I'm able to sort of judge that and give it out as though they're exactly on track for everything.
There we go, giving them participation XP.
Chat is informing us it's from our Unearthed Arcana, which came out in 2004. So Gestalt is 15 years old.
Wow.
Never really it's a pretty obscure. Unearthed Arcana is a fun book, but it's the optional rules book, so it's fairly obscure as a source for something that really has caught on. Like as soon as you said Gestalt, I think I couldn't
name another rule out of that book. I think most people who run Gestalt couldn't name another single rule out of that book.
Yeah. It's one of the few books that Wizards put into almost entirely in the OGL. So it appears on D20 PFSRD, not PFSRD, D20 SRD.
The hyperlink D20. Yeah,
yes.
It was that. It was a lot of. I think there are epic stuff that went in there too. They sort of
in there. Psionic.
And Oriental Adventures got a lot of its stuff in there.
Oh, I didn't realize that one.
And the Psychic, yeah. So that was it. It was the 3 core rule books, Epic, Psionic, Oriental.
So Adam Daigle is...
It's interesting to me that they would define that way, because part of that is they're sort of defining the player experience, right? They're saying, here's what we're going to give you and then have you use it. Sure, we sell a lot of other stuff, but here's sort of the box we're putting around some of our content and saying, this ought to be enough for you to use. The 5th edition SRD is sort of puzzling me. They don't have warlocks in it, for example. But that's one of the. They put a little box. They don't say anything. Put a little box around it and said, "Play with this." Right.
What would you think is Pathfinder First Edition's little box?
The most common Pathfinder. It's a good question. It's a great question. the Pathfinder First Edition box I see used most often is play with the hardbacks, not the soft covers. That's what's in the PRD that we put out. Depending on what's in, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's in the OGL legally that other people can use, but around the table, a lot of people just defer to the PRD and say if the rules are there, that's fine, or the rules are there except for Mythic and Technology Guide, go ahead and play with it. That's something that I see very often. There's some level of suspicion in some of the player companion rules. There's a higher level of suspicion around third party rules that a lot of GMs will be, all right, let me just take the PRD. If it's on the PRD, it's in the hardback book, then go ahead, you can play with it.
That did remind me that we didn't really talk so much about your blog. We mentioned it just briefly and then mostly talked about your published work, but your blog has some great advice. Like, you made me understand how to draw an angle on a map.
And if that seems to be coming from a frustrated developer who's tired of having to redraw maps because making the angles not useful, then maybe so. I have to give a lot of credit to Owen Casey Stevens, who, when we were hanging around after work one day, said, look, every single day you come across things that people in the industry would kind of want to know about how to be a developer and how to write. And if you just take just a few minutes, a couple times a week, jot those down and throw them out there, I think it's something that people will find very valuable. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of run the gamut. I mean, sometimes it's just like a silly stat block, or sometimes it's some serious consideration of how you present sort of NPCs, and sometimes it's just kind of a gee whiz point. But I do try to get a couple things a week just to put on my blog in order to get out there. Owen was the one that said you can make it almost automatic and easy to go onto Facebook and Twitter and whatever else you'd like. So I set that up as well.
With all
it's
that
also
free time,
succinct.
What's that?
It's also succinct. A lot of your blog posts are short, but they are straight to the point and they make a great point. And that's why I appreciate it. It's like I get exactly what I came here to read, and it didn't take me very long.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Frankly, a lot of those start a little longer, and then I go back through, and in the course of bolding the parts that are important, I'm like, I'm just going to cut some of the stuff that is maybe a little less relevant or a little more tangential. So I'm glad to see that that's being well received, that I'm trying to be sort of punchy about these.
All right, I think we're about ready to wrap things up. I know that probably most of the future things that you're going to be working on are not announced yet. It's probably second edition material after the launch, but is there anything that you've got your fingerprints on that's going to be out at launch?
As far as the stuff we've mentioned, I've done some freelance writing for products that are kind of fun. Being able to sort of shape how monsters are described in the bestiary, or how, nations are in the Lost Omens World Guide. It's almost certainly no coincidence that when the developers of that were looking for somebody to write the section about the Eye of Terror and the region where the Whispering Tyrant is, like, hey Ron, would you write this? Well, yes, I know exactly. I've done tons of research on it, know exactly what that's about. So that's been a lot of fun to be able to contribute. We had a couple different office games of the playtest rules, which I'm now trying to busily scrub from my mind so I don't confuse the playtest rules versus the final second edition rules, some of which aren't yet finalized, but we're getting ready to be finalized. Anyway, so I have a very chaotic mind when it comes to those rules, right?
Not even mentioning that there's 6 versions of the playtest rules, or maybe more.
Yeah, the 1.67, I think technically. I think there's 6 updates to the original, so yeah, 7 versions of those. And then people that are paying attention to stuff that Jason or some of the design team have said, we're going to change X and we're going to change it in this way. I mean, maybe that's an 8th version, like a 9th version or something like that. So it's a lot to juggle.
I guarantee you somewhere is a super fan updating notes in a PDF document.
Yeah, I did initially, like at the first update we did, I took my playtest rulebook and took a pen and crossed stuff out and rewrote stuff. And then by the second one, I'm like, I'm not going to be able to do this for all these. So
a lot of our listeners are going to be facing with that same scrubbing that they're going to have to do. So what is your advice? What technique are you using to get old rules out of your brain?
Playing the second edition. That's what I'm doing. I'm doing playing in the second edition. I'm doing writing in the second edition, development, some of the stuff for second edition that I can't yet announce, but that's the detailed stuff. There's an advantage, I think, for if you're playing the playtest now because you're excited about the second edition, maybe the best thing you can do for yourself is take a couple months break and then come at the second edition fresh. Play some first edition stuff. Play Tyrant's Grasp, for goodness sakes, in order to make sure that you're
they'll
sort
be
of
done by August.
Yeah, but be done by August. The whole thing be done by August.
If you're the Order of the Amber Die, you'll be done by August.
Journey to the Rocket. But that's the mental break that I had in between the playtest and having to really dig into second edition rules of like digging right into Tyrant's Grasp was actually very helpful for me. That was one of the good ways to sort of scrub everything out. Is all right, now I know what happens when you have multiple levels of Oracle and this template to this monster and so on, so on, so on. Right? A lot of very specific details going to drive everything else out.
Well, Ron, I think we're about ready to wrap things up. Is there anything you want to bring people's attention to before you go?
No, I think that there's a lot going on in our world. I think that it's a lot of fun to see. I think there are a lot of people who are anxious to get Tyrant's Grasp to see big changes in the world. There are some, not all the big changes in our world are in Grasp, but there's enough there that it's worth sort of looking at, going through, reading about. I mean, it's going to be fun stuff. It's a fun journey. We're going to take it right on the journey right up to August and then into the new edition.
Excellent. And can you remind people where they can find you online?
I am, Paizo.com, Paizo stuff. Myself, I am runamuckgames.com. That's where you can find the blog. That's where you can find products that I've got and links to where you can go buy them. If you look back through the blogs, you'll see they were sparse, not even monthly necessarily for the last couple of years, but starting, I want to say last November, December, I've really kicked it up. I think there's a lot of good stuff to see. runamuckgames.com.
And it's the Design Diary is the link you want to click for the blog, right?
Yep, the Design Diary is the blog.
And what's your con schedule look like? Where can some of our fans catch you?
Ooh, come see me at PaizoCon and Gen Con. I'll be wearing the stylish Paizo polo shirts when I'm there. I have little other con obligations. I had thought to myself when I moved out here, I thought, well, I'm probably still going to be able to go to lots of cons and be able to get sort of family approval, spouse and kids approval to do that. But it turns out the ones I go to for work are the only ones I'm really hitting these days. So, sorry, wife and kids, daddy's got to go to work at Gen Con.
Oh man, I wish more people.
That's where you can find me.
That for us that do this for a living, Gen Con is work.
Yeah. Well, and it's actually kind of neat. The first Gen Con I did for work was the last Gen Con, and there were plenty of new people at the company, older people at the company, right, who find it very exhausting. I find it exhilarating. I had so much energy at the end of every day, and when I got back from Gen Con, it was fantastic. I actually kind of thrive on that sort of thing. So.
Darren Caldemeyer wants everyone to know that there's 72 days until PaizoCon. Are you ready?
I am not ready, as a matter of fact. I've got prep of my own to do. Holy crap, only 72 days. All right, we got to cut this off.
All right, thank you once again for joining us, Ron. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much.
We will have you back on because I feel like we just scratched the surface of things we could be talking about.
Happy to do so.
All right, we'll be right back right after this. Bye, Ron.
Pathfinder News. Pathfinder News. Pathfinder News. Pathfinder News.
And we're back. Ron is still here. Hey, Ron.
I am. Hello. I'm actually. I got only 72 days to.
All right, I'm muted.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much.
All right. Well, since we're at an edit point, Param, you don't sound great. Just health wise, are you okay to keep going with the episode, or do you want to wrap things up?
I sound bad? Oh crap!
You've been coughing a lot, and
I haven't even noticed. Oh boy. No.
Sorry. Well, you've been muting.
Oh yeah.
So, are you good to go?
Yes, I'm good to keep going.
Okay.
Though this would be a good time to also shout out to, since this probably should be cut out thing, immediately after our show ends. Well, it might be depending on when we cut it, but on our planned ending time, there's going to be a live stream of Paizo running some second edition with Jason Bowman as GM, and so after you're done watching us, of course, then you can hop over to, I think, GMT magazine, Game Trade magazine, is the ones that are hosting that. And I don't have the Twitch link handy, or else I'd put that in chat or in Hostel.
Yeah. But Daigle just shared that. He said that Game Trade Media going to be streaming a second edition game with playtest running at Gamma. It's supposed to start at 8 p.m. Pacific, which is 11 o'clock, which is in about 45 minutes. Gives us a little time to do stuff. I think we should be off the air by then.
Oh, yeah. We normally would be. Unless it's me pushing the episode long. I have a habit of doing that.
All right, so then we are going to be doing our banter and news segment.
Yes. Well, let me make the goblins say the noise again.
Okay.
Pathfinder News. Pathfinder News. Pathfinder News. Pathfinder News.
And we're back.
In the Pathfinder News segment, we talk about all the things that are happening for Pathfinder, from Paizo, from third-party publishers, from licensees, just things that are of interest to our listeners related to Pathfinder. Now, Param, a couple of days ago, I guess, like last week, we had a special episode where we covered all of the second edition announcements, and at one point, you kind of estimated the page count difference between the first edition release for Pathfinder campaign setting material and the second edition releases. You've now had the chance to break down the math.
Yeah, and we have new info.
We have new info. Okay, so
live stream,
what can you tell us about your findings? So
on a live stream on Friday that Paizo put out with Eric Mona doing an interview with Dan Tharp, the Paizo PR guru, he confirmed that the new World Guideline, which is the official name for this thing now, it's called the World Guideline, and it will contain what used to be, it will be both player and GM focused. So it's basically the fusion of the two softcover lines into one hardcover product. That they will all be hardcovers, and they will come out quarterly, which is what I mathed on our preview episode. While the exact page count of each individual one, they say may vary, using the one that they are putting out as a baseline, and it seems to be about what we would expect the page count to be for a product like that. If it comes out quarterly, it ends up that it's only about, depending on the composition of any given year, 20 to 40 pages less content over the course of the entire year than we would have gotten if we had the softcover lines running concurrently. But on the flip side of that, the combined retail price of the books is only $136 if we base it off of the current one, or maybe it's $142. But compared to $220, which was the combined retail price of the soft covers at the current rate that they were being released. So losing 20 to 40 pages on the year, saving almost half your money.
Now, Justin Franklin is in chat saying that there's no plans for soft covers, but they could do one in the World Guideline. And he says that Eric said that, but I believe Luis said during the last stream that Eric said the World Guideline is going to be all hardcovers.
Right.
Justin Franklin, where did you get that information? Because that's contrary to the quote that I last heard about it. Param, do you have any insight?
It says Eric said, so maybe it was the live stream. Also, Paizo likes to never say never. When they always say that. But as I said, the current plan that we have on quote was for them to all be hardcovers. But yeah, like they said never say never, most famously when we started asking them 11 years ago or 10 years ago about if there would ever be a second edition.
Mm-hmm. Oh, there you go. Yeah, Daigle says they reserve the ability to be flexible. And Luis confirms the current books on the schedule in the World Guideline are hardcover. Things may change with later releases.
Indeed.
Okay, so plans are hardcover. Plans can change.
Also, Daigle said, Donato says, because Daigle just said that, and we just said that Daigle said that. Indeed. Yes. Yeah. Paizo, again, like I said, has always said they never say never.
And why should they? Why be beholden to something you said in the past as a fact when you really had no way of guaranteeing it?
Yeah, that seems like a way to just get yourself into trouble. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I see up the argument online that in the wake of the second edition announcement of Paizo said there would never be a second edition. I'm like, well, regardless of how you feel about the upcoming second edition, we have it on recording dozens of times where they very specifically said they will never say there will never be a second edition. That they, even going all the way back to the very first Gen Con, that first edition ever walked its baby steps in, the recordings I have of those seminars, that question comes up and they say, we'll never say never. We'll probably do it in 10 or 11 years.
Now, Daigle has an interesting quote from chat. He's saying that essentially they want book size and format to fit the topic instead of feeling shackled to a static format and size.
Oh, that's
totally interesting.
Now, my math was all just using the current release as, like, you know, if they all released like the World Guide. But, you know, if it's going to be flexible page counts, then my math is pretty worthless.
No, it's not pretty worthless. It's a good estimate. I mean, hardcovers do need to be a minimum amount of page count. Otherwise, the covers are thicker than the pages.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I do know that there was definitely some of the soft covers that people have complained about the content. The Blood of Elements, I think, is a good example of it. And the response was just like, well, we had to write to format. So we had to do certain things. It's just like what these Blood of books are, which has got to be an unsatisfying answer from both sides of that question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and while I am excited about what this could mean for the future, it also has me a little bit worried because there were some in the reverse case where things like the marketplace books and the alchemy books and stuff that were just these very tiny topics that were just the perfect amount to fill a small 32 pager, but never could be justified into a larger topic.
But they could be a chapter in a larger topic.
Yes. I have faith that they know how to make good books, because so far they have.
Speaking of chapters, F3 Cubed has an interesting question. What about the mysterious secret chapter in the core rulebook? Do you know what they're referring to?
I have no idea what they're referring to. If this is an in-joke, I don't know.
I don't believe it's an in-joke. They do have a laughing emoji after it, but if you would like to elaborate, F3 Cubed, or if anyone in chat knows what's being referred to there, we'd like to know more, but I could tell you we cannot tell you any information about it. This is the first we're hearing of it.
Man, what if Pathfinder 2 is a legacy game and we have to like tear the rulebook apart and there's like secret rules hidden inside the inner flap, and like at one point in time you have to throw all your minis away and then you break the bestiary in half and 4 new PC minis pop out?
All right, so Daigle has clarified that something. Sorry, Bram, I didn't want to no-sell your joke. I appreciate it. But Daigle is saying that Eric said in the Friday stream there was a mysterious chapter, which Majuna says that it was a post from Mark Seifterman in the forums, and speculation has begun.
Ooh, I need to go deep dive research this secret chapter. How do you make a chapter secret in a book that everybody?
No. I think the content at this point of what that book will, or what that chapter will be, is a secret. It won't be a secret once people buy the book and read it. I don't think, anyway.
No, it should be. I do want my Pathfinder Legacy Edition. I want to be like holding candles to the back of like the index and then secretly reading the stat blocks for the hidden 13th class.
So there are books like that, like basically
I know,
an escape room in a book.
Great.
Yeah.
That's why it would be awesome.
Would not be great in the core rule book. A Pathfinder book like that would be a lot of fun, especially if it's something that tied into an adventure, but not the core rule book.
If they never tell us and then we only find out like 2 years later, it's like, what do you mean the Mega Magus? That's a class?
So F3 Cube is speculating it is an intro adventure. Justin Franklin is saying his guess is an illustrated character creation section. So kind of like
the strategy guide?
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, micro version of the strategy guide. That would be super useful. What would you like from a chapter that we've never seen in a core rulebook, Pam?
Oh my gosh, it's so tough. Goodness. I mean, there's already so much in these core rulebooks. It's kind of hard to narrow down.
I cannot believe that there is enough space left in this core rulebook
Okay.
that there could be a whole chunk of content we don't even know about.
A hex crawling chapter.
Go on.
Like the wilderness exploration
Like Ultimate
rules.
Wilderness?
Yeah, like something like that. Like, actual we have this exploration mode that kind of wasn't super developed in the beta version. What if it is super developed and there's hexes and maps and community rules, and like the stat blocks for the towns mean something again, and like all that adventuring part of the adventure that doesn't involve initiative could be super fleshed out. And the core rulebook hasn't done that yet.
Yeah, and part of our review of Ultimate Wilderness was like, how is this not in the core rulebook? This is like 10 years after that book came out, and this is the first time we're getting this, and it's wonderful. It was amazing content.
I know, it was so great, and it's
Now, Battering Lamb says it could be monster ancestry creation. Now, we know that there have been aloof allusions to, I am happy with that word selection. There have been aloof allusions to there will be a book with something about monster and ancestry creations. It just won't be the first bestiary. The quote may say it wasn't coming out at launch, but expect it soon after.
That's what they said. The quote was from Eric Mona that it wouldn't be in the bestiary, but expect it to come soon after.
So Adam Daigle says that he is experienced the hardest part of his job, which is keeping his mouth shut when watching the show.
I'm glad that we're making you earn that salary. Oh. I'm Blathering Lamb. Yes, Adam needs to keep his mouth shut. Like I said last episode, he's one of our favorite peoples, and we don't want bad things to happen to him should Eric Mona also be watching this show.
I am going to, all right, I'm just going to say a joke that won't get out of my head and is preventing me from coming up with new things. I believe it's going to be a Starship Combat chapter.
I do want that. Not for starships.
Vehicles?
I do want the Starship Combat. It has its problems in Starfinder, but there's this glimmer of hope. And when I do hope that when they do publish the Starship book for Starfinder, which has to be coming, that has to be a book that will come out eventually. It's a big part of the fantasy of Starfinder is starships, and it's one of the lesser supported parts of the game. But I do want those rules back ported to Pathfinder for water combat in ships.
Yeah, I know that there are vehicle rules that came out in Ultimate Combat, and they were always kind of glossed over. Even Adventure Paths and Pathfinder Society adventures that included them had very simplified version of those rules. So I would like some kind of vehicular rules from the core rulebook. Hopefully not something so crunchy as Ultimate Combat, but something a little more broad than the simplified version of those rules. Because like you went straight to boats, and that is probably the most common vehicle. But we've got Scott Melville in chat saying airships, alchemical airships. That's definitely a popular part of the fantasy right now.
Dragons?
Just like yes, okay. Like fighting dragons from your airship?
Yeah.
Or riding a mechanical dragon?
That would be a much more cinematic and fun way to have a dragon fight, is aboard your airship.
You cut out for a second, sorry.
I said that would be one of the more exciting and cinematic ways to have a dragon fight, is not just on the ground while it strafes you, but aboard an airship doing drive-bys.
Sure. And having a boarding party jumping on the dragon, fighting on his back.
See, this is already so much cooler than finding a young red dragon in the cave. Like, there would be a whole class, like anything that's like gargantuan or bigger could have vehicle rules for it. So like, the Tarash shows up, that's a humongous, epic or mythic level vehicle encounter. All
right, then that's it. That's my vote. I want vehicles in the core rulebook.
Yes. And that means that those golems that you could pilot that was in Bestiary 5, then yeah.
Yeah,
we get to do kaiju battles with vehicle
we get
rules.
Vehicle golems. Vehicles that turn into some kind of robot. Maybe those robots then form a bigger robot.
Exactly. That's perfect.
Constructicons.
And they've crossed over with G.I. Joe enough that you can have your fantasy too, Ryan.
Thank you. My fantasy already includes ninjas and samurais, so I don't even need anything to help get my fantasy into the game.
But you could have like
Daigle in chat says fantasy in disguise. Thank you, Daigle. Thank you.
that would be fun. That needs to happen.
In the core rulebook, though?
Yes, because then it would be in the core rulebook, and they'd have to start working it in the Pathfinder Society adventures. Could you imagine what the 1,400 player Gen Con game would be like if they had rules like this for us to play with?
Yeah. Everyone gets their own vehicle. The first hour is just building it together. And then, you've got the big projection, and it's like, all right, here's how land battles are going. Here's how sea battles. Here's how air battles are going. And then you're like, oh, no. People made airships, so you've got to reconfigure your vehicle so that now it can fly.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and WizKids can totally jump on the bandwagon here with some great licensed marketing miniature/toys.
Yes. Mm-hmm. They've already been doing terrain is becoming a very popular category for a lot of miniature makers. And so having people that just take on the vehicles section of that.
Oh, they already made Attack Wing for D&D.
Yes, but that mostly focused on creatures, right?
Mostly dragons, but they had I think they had airships in that.
Battering Lamb says they now want it to be vehicle rules because they sound so dope.
Yeah, I know, right? Yes, vehicles! Finally!
So this started as a joke, and then I was going to say what my actual prediction was. Do you remember in Kingmaker, the campsite rules?
Which Kingmaker?
Kingmaker, the video game.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, so they just added this entire thing where campsite roles, and you fill those roles like the guard and the guy doing the hunting, and this changes how well you sleep. There is a lot there, and the first time that I saw that, I was like, this is basically like the kingdom building shrunk down to every single night. You figure out the different roles of the area you're in and how to best protect your party. And it reminded me back to the first RPG Superstar, where one of the judges' complaints or observations was a lot of people made campsite items. Why would they make something so lacking in sexy? It's just because that's something that for whatever reason we really associate with the part of adventuring is that at some point you got to stop and camp, and there's a lot of things to consider at camp. So my other prediction, which is way less dope sounding than vehicle rules, is campsite rules, like a real exploration of how to do campsites so that it is an engaging and involved part of the game.
Well, that sounds like that could easily be worked into an important part of exploration rules.
Okay, so we can have both. I get my campsites, we all get our vehicles.
Yeah. Honestly, it would be that's important. Like when you explore, you're going to be camping a lot. When you go to a hex, it's usually a day's travel. That's why the hexes are there. And so you need rules for how to do this camping, and you're right, Kingmaker did a good job with it.
And it's also it's one of those things where you expect something bad to happen, and so the players spend a lot of time trying to make sure something bad doesn't happen. And sometimes the adventurers do assume something bad will happen, and so suddenly the GMs have to figure out a way around all of the preparation and forethought that the players have put into it, and kind of deny them their victory that they deserve because an adventure calls for an ambush at night. So having more codified rules so that you can then write an adventure that says this is how you would approach a campsite, these are the things that would happen, and make an encounter out of it instead of just an assumption that this is something that's going to happen in storyline.
I like it.
King of Rock is saying that they did include the time needed to be spent to rest 8 hours with watches in the playtest. Yeah, but I don't know if you've played Kingmaker, King of Rock, but it really was an intricate subsystem that was super intuitive, super fast, and it made camping something that happens. Oh, and Daigle says that he fears the speculation about the secret chapter is going to build things up too much, end up disappointing some folks. This is me every birthday from age 6 to 25. The concept of what my presents could be always was more impressive than what my presents actually ended up being.
I am sad for little bitty kid version of Ryan. I mean, the one that was only a few inches taller than me instead of the mountains in height that he stands above me at Gen Con. Oh, darn it. But, hey, Man,
Darren Caldmeyer
already,
saying,
I've gone through
"Are
the
you
cycle. I'm already disappointed.
Maybe the secret chapter will just be a series of compliments to the reader."
You know what would be a useful thing to have in the core rule book that was in the Game Mastery Guide?
What's that?
A new version of the 100 words.
Okay. I like the 100. Was it 100 words? I thought it was just a list of words that were useful for
I think it was
every
just a list of words. You should have kept count. You tweeted them.
I tweeted. So for people that don't know, in the Game Mastery Guide, there's a list of words that every GM should know. It's a good list of words, and I decided that one of the things we would do with the No Direction Twitter account when we first launched it was every day I would tweet a definition of that word. At the time, I think we had 80 characters, and most of those words were more complicated than you could define in 80 characters. So I had to choose between either tweeting 4 or 5 things in a row, which I didn't know how to do at the time. I was new to Twitter. This is 10 years ago. That or narrowing down the definition of a complicated, interesting word so that it fits into a space that did not service that word well. So yeah, if you ever go into our Twitter account, go to the very beginning, there's just like 5 definitions and then nothing for 6 years until Luis took it over.
Oh no, they're already throwing words at us. King of Rock is wanting to know oubliette, which is a place of forgetting. And then Donado Classic, I can't even pronounce that one.
Calyptian?
Yes. I don't know what a Calyptian is.
I don't know either. I know an oubliette because oubliette comes from the French word oublier, which is probably from Latin. But yeah, oubli is forget. So I know already it's something. It's a noun that relates to forgetting.
It's a place in the
And you're
dungeon.
saying
You
place-
put it's an isolation place that you have a dungeon that you put a prisoner that you just don't want to look at for a while. It's
okay.
It's a place of dread. Like in various fantasies, they've depicted them as like cages hanging above bottomless pits and stuff. More commonly, it would just be a big old pit.
Mm-hmm.
Just throw them in there.
Okay. I thought that the person using it was somehow being forced to forget, like some kind of brainwashing. No, you're saying that they are what's being forgotten.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's sad. So, Parent, we have a couple more lists on our banter. We have a couple more items on our banter list, and we've got 22 minutes before Jason's stream goes live. I'm a little worried we won't be able to cover the ability scores, backstory, and how they impact role playing. What do you think?
That one's too long. What's their other one?
Okay. Did Dewey Goblins and Kobolds swap roles?
Yes, they did.
I agree.
Yes, they
Done.
did. Done. Great. No, so it's not just the cover of the bestiary that had that showed Wayne Reynolds' reinterpretation of kobolds, which he appears to be quite proud of on his Twitter account. I don't blame him. They do look cool. And of course, if you watched their episode last week, it was like they look a lot like goblins, and I even thought they might be lizard goblins because we have goblin monkeys. Why not lizard goblins?
Yeah, when Alex asked me what they were, I was like, those goblin-looking things. I've seen the comparison between those creatures, even without people who knew what they were, and goblins right away.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's the wide head, and that's what it's doing it.
It definitely is the wide head.
But and then of course we were chatting afterwards. In one of the rare instances, we're talking about the game that one of us doesn't shout the word content at each other and save it for an episode. And I basically said, with how they've been building up the kobolds, especially in Pathfinder Society, if you've played like the Sewer Dragons of Absalom series, that's a great set of adventures. Totally go run those if you can. Especially, that's a good set of adventures to run leading up to second edition's release, because one of the second edition preview releases, the beta versions, deals with them too. And I have a feeling that that's not by accident, that you do not put that much focus on something launching an edition that you do not intend to use later. But compared to goblins, they were really setting up kobolds to be a good playable race. Like, we have this whole backstory of this clan of kobolds that is behaving peacefully, and they've made alliances, and we've gotten to really know them on a personable level, and we're again and again doing tasks with this. They even made a Weeby Kobolds adventure. It wasn't called Weeby Kobolds, but there is one of those. So it made sense that kobolds...
Wasn't it?
No, that's just the joke name for it. I think it is.
Okay.
I think it is True Dragons of No, I think it references the Dragons of Absalom theme that goes through them, and they would make a great playable race for Pathfinder, and with very little of the problems that are brought up when people argue against goblins as a playable race in the core rulebook.
And what would be an iconic class for the kobolds to play?
It has to be rogue, because they are They are traps. The whole thing about kobolds is the kobold dungeon is a horrifically frightening place to adventure in, because you'll never see a kobold and you'll still die horribly anyway, because it is just laced with trap after trap after trap.
So I was going to suggest alchemist, because that's the scientist, the engineer, and also the role that goblins were given in the core rulebook for 2nd edition.
Yeah, that would work too. Especially a trappy alchemist with a racial tendency to make horrible explodey traps.
So, like, we don't really have anywhere to go with this other than this was an made that really feels like the kobolds are not the kobolds that they used to be. Mm-hmm. And goblins, at least a chunk of them, are going to be written as not the goblins that we're used to. Mm-hmm. And yet, if goblins weren't super marketable, it feels like a much more comfortable place for these two races would be. Maybe goblins have evolved and they look like those evil creatures now, or maybe some chunk of them have, and they're elite goblins. And then kobolds just join the playable race group. Mm-hmm. Our ancestry.
Bard1B is pointing out that True Dragons of Absalom is the name of the pre-gen.
No, you got
referenced as Weeby Kobolds. It's really, really play Sewer Dragons of Absalom and True Dragons of Absalom. It's fantastic. They're great adventures. And as a GM, you get to have so much fun because the kobolds are very fleshed out with personalities, and the encounters are great. And there's Alt-Yugs in it. There's Alt-Yugs! You know I love Alt-Yugs.
Is reinforcing what you're saying, too. Is saying that kobolds were becoming a pretty friendly race in PFS, and that Kobolds of Glarian gave a lot of specific class options.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm fully expecting, especially this last few years, there's been these, like, boon races that you can earn your way into by just playing a bunch of games and check off this check beat. I will be shocked if the year one boon race for PFS isn't Kobold.
And the way that sometimes that boon race, or it'll be Ancestry now, the way that works is that sometimes if you like GM a certain number of tables, you get the lower one and then it levels up. And the fact that there's now 5 variant kobolds based on the 5 chromatic dragons. Ooh. There may be more, but like you could see how they could be tiered so that the more powerful ones go to the GMs that put in more hours.
Oh, like the top one could be the ones that get the wings.
I like that you flapped your arms in case I didn't know what wings were. Yeah, no, this was just topic. I think we covered it.
Yeah, there's not much more to go on it. I mean, on the record, I'm not anti-goblin. I'm kind of neutral goblin. Like, I understand why people have a problem with it, but I'll move on. It doesn't bother me too much.
Yeah, I think I've said super I am pro against, but ambivalent about it.
Okay.
Like, yeah, all right, this doesn't make sense, but what do I care?
Right. But I'm super pro kobold.
Yeah, I would not have thought of kobold until we had that brief conversation. But I kind of wish there were kobolds now.
Playable there's going to be this giant opening in Free RPG Day now that Weeby Goblins is no longer super important. Like, what's so special about Weeby Goblins? We can always be goblins. It could be kobolds now.
Wow, I didn't really think of that. I figured that the Free RPG Day one this year, which is going to have a new cast of goblins, that it was going to be that way because they didn't want to have a regular cast storyline continue in that weird, like, because it's using the playtest rules, the version 1 playtest rules, and it's going to have a weird place in history because it's not really a version of the game. It is a preparation for the next version of the game. Mm-hmm. But that might be it for Weeby Goblins.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, why? What makes it so special to have Weeby Goblins again?
It just the characters who we're not seeing this year.
But they can just work those into normal adventures now.
Yeah, they really can. Mm-hmm. Wow.
In
I
the
wasn't
Evan
prepared
era.
to say goodbye to those characters, at least in the Weeby Goblin series. That's it. I wasn't prepared to say goodbye to the Weeby Goblin series yet, Param.
I'm sorry. I
Really
mean, I'm
hit me in
just
the
doing
heart.
rampant speculation. But hey, it could be Weeby Owlbears.
Go on.
Think about it.
I'm thinking about it.
You play a tribe of owlbears, and by tribe I mean pack, because owlbears don't talk; they just hoot. And it would be, you could just frame the whole adventure up as these crazy, wild, invading PCs keep attacking your territory and your caves, and you've got to protect the hatchlings. The Andrin logging company that they villainize so much in the first set of adventures is encroaching on your territory, and it's you and your 4 other owlbear friends' job to take down that lumber mill so that your family and the hatchlings can be safe.
No, you know what? I should be more on board, but I'm not really feeling owlbears right now.
You get to rip arms off people.
Yeah, okay. All right, I'm there.
Okay.
All right, Param, I think we're about ready to wrap things up.
Yeah, I think we are ready to go.
We'll be right back to wrap things up right after this.
Wrap-ups and shoutouts. Wrap-ups and shoutouts. Wrap-ups. Wrap-ups and shoutouts.
And we're back.
Thank you for joining us for episode 195 of No Direction, the No Direction Network's Pathfinder news, reviews, and interviews podcast. Thank you to Ron Lundeen for joining us for this episode and a really fun interview that I predict will be the first of many.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally want him back on because there were so many things I wanted to ask that.
Before we go, there's a couple of things we'd like to bring your attention to. I want to give a shout out to Marlowe House. Andrew Marlowe is a current member of the No Direction Network family. He's one of our bloggers. Every other Tuesday, he releases the Inspire Confidence was Monica's. What's the name of Andrew's blog? Burst of Insight. Mm-hmm. Andrew writes the Burst of Insight blog every other week, and it's one of our more... it's one of our broader articles. Sometimes it'll be GM advice. Sometimes it'll be house ruling advice. Sometimes it's... Thank you, Darren. Sometimes it'll just be a deep dive into something he's been thinking about.
Recently, he did the series on how to other systems to use for different types of adventures that you still want to play in Galarian, including Dread.
Yep. So recently, they announced that Marlowe House would have a special guest coming up. It will be Nick Logue. Nick Logue will be joining the Marlowe House for a stream on this Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern to talk about improv at the gaming table. And if you've ever been to a PaizoCon, or I guess any con where Nick Logue is present, you know that he is a improv beast. Mm-hmm. I once described, because he did a celebrity game where he was improvising he was running an adventure for a Paizo staff. And I said I'd never seen a group of people GM'd at, because he was railroading himself. It was just like this constant stream. And at one point, he was getting so involved in a description, answering a question that Wes asked, that Wes was leaning back and becoming almost uncomfortable with just how long and how involved this answer was, which was super entertaining. And he's a very funny guy. But I have never seen a GM like Nick Logue. And Nick Logue, of course, has written a lot of Pathfinder adventures, in case you're not familiar with the name. So the fact that he's going to be on Marlowe House Presents, that is a cool get for them. I'm not entirely sure what the Marlowe relationship with Nick Logue is, other than that Andrew likes to share once a year the picture of him kicking Nick in the junk.
Indeed. Though I don't know that this will be the case, but if Nick Logue is going to be there, it may be adult language.
Ooh, that is a very good point. But we host their stream on our stream, right?
Yeah, they're on their auto host.
Okay. And we don't have to worry about our channel's ratings our PG rating going up.
That's
okay.
them.
All right, cool. So it's a good warning, but yeah, if you can check out their channel, you can check out our channel. We'll be hosting their stream this Friday at 9 p.m. The Baker is coming for you. Wants to know if people will be tuning in for the PF2 live stream tonight. Yes, that's one of the reasons we're wrapping up right now. I don't know if I'm going to stay up to watch it, but I'll definitely be checking it out in the morning.
And I will set the Airstream to host that as soon as we're done.
That's a good point because we don't auto-host Game Trade Media.
No. Though one thing that they do is they Game Trade Media does a lot of little chat sessions, mostly on their Facebook page, where they'll just kick the live camera on and they'll start painting minis in chat, and they'll it'll be like just cool chats about the game industry and also tips for painting minis. And sometimes I just like to leave that on because that's just a cool thing.
Cool. Is that something that we should look into?
I did it once.
We're just doing game related.
I did that once. I'd like to do it again. It was fairly well received when we did it. We kicked on me and James and Alex and one of my local players kicked on the stream one night while we were just painting minis. It was fun. Hey, if you guys want to see just us hanging out doing stuff, let us know. I mean, it's not much effort for me to turn this camera on as long as I'm not editing it into a podcast after the fact.
Yeah, you know what? That's something I might experiment with too, because maybe the next time I have to level Xavier, our No Direction Adventurous character, I'll just do it on a live stream, just narrate what I'm doing, let people know what the build is like, and see if anyone has any insight, they can let me know. Yeah. That would be a cool experiment.
It's a good opportunity also to get questions to us and just sort of chat and hang out.
Well, that'll be something for the future. We'll probably, if we are going to do something like that, we'll announce a date on our Patreon, which, by the way, you can go to patreon.com/nodirection. And if you like what we do, if you want to support us, if you want to make sure that we can stay up to date with our equipment and with our, con attendance and whatnot, throw us a couple of bucks. Every donation, every backer is appreciated. And I really do think that since we launched the Patreon, we really have upped our game, and it is 100% because the Patreon made that possible.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And we appreciate it. If you can find the link at, of course, patreon.com/nodirection. But also, you can find the link to it, as well as all of our rest of our content at nodirectionpodcast.com. If you go there, you'll find links to our Patreon, if you want to support us, as well as links to our Discord chat, which is the chillest place to hang out and talk about Pathfinder or Starfinder, gaming, anime. Just hang out with our fans, hang out with us. It's a fairly busy place and getting busier every week. And it's a great way to stay in contact throughout the week and also know what we're doing, especially our insider backers who get access to a special Discord chat room where we tell them in advance when we're planning stuff. Shh. Like, for instance, they knew about Stellar weeks before the rest of you all did, because we weren't, we're more comfortable telling the backers things that may change in the future with the caveat, hey, we're thinking about doing this. This might be a person we bring on. We ain't even got art yet. We haven't even named this thing yet. I'm going to play a bear.
We have one detail finalized. Yeah. Taram is a bear.
Well, and Alex is a Skittermander.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was voted on. The insiders got to vote on what character Alex was going to play. Mm-hmm.
That's going to be recording soon, right? First episode?
First episode is the 30th or 31st. I know I'm recording Adventurous one day, and the very next day, it's either that. It's reversed or not. It's like I'm recording Stellar one day and Adventurous the next, or Adventurous one day, Stellar the next. I'm going to have a very busy weekend.
And there's one more thing I want to shout out to, and it does relate to the website. And this is by request, because Randall's blog this week was about a chimera.
Ooh, yes, I saw the art.
This is the black dragon head of the mythical chimera. I am joined by a lion and a goat.
Yeah, I'm back in the podcast!
And I just want to bring your attention to Groundbreaking by Randall Meyer. This week he talks about the Chimera of the Gorge. Row.
Cameos!
That is the return of the Chimera.
He is, yes.
Which I have never done live. That was always something I pre-recorded for the advertisements.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate the live voices. I cannot do voices.
It's a talent I slowly developed, and Some of them were popular, some of them were not.
Oh, I want to give a shout out to a company I recently discovered that I've been sharing around on Twitter. Trash Mob Minis. Do you remember the paper minis I used to shout out to? Well, this is a paper mini company that makes we talked about Super Dungeon Explorer, right? When we briefly talked about Ninja Division.
Yeah.
Okay. You know that chibi animated art style, that kind of cute art style? They make paper minis like that. And they're all available and finished and buyable online, and you don't have to worry about not getting them. And they produce a ton of them, and with lots of variants. It's just really great looking minis. You purchase the PDFs and print them out at really good prices, not affiliated with us in any way. I just think they're freaking awesome, so go check them out.
Until next time, I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Perrin.
And if you want to find the path, you need no direction. Thanks, guys. Good night.